anywhere in California, New York, whatever. And he offered me the sequel. He called it the sequel to Bloody Mama, which was Boxcar Bertha.
The thing that applied real well from student filmmaking to that kind of filmmaking was to make what you had go as far as it was possible, to try and get it to look as much like a bigger film as possible, and to never sit there and say, I need more.
I'd like to withdraw my entire account.
Your entire account?
Yes, ma'am, the whole thing.
And your name?
John Dillinger.
All right, everybody, hold it right where you are. This is a robbery.
I look at it today and it looks real crude, but I didn't feel terribly constrained when I was doing it. The things that I liked and wanted to put into it, this sense of the land and the kind of folk tale told in a kind of John Ford vista, that's all free, that's there.
Johnny!
You just have to be inspired by The Searchers or something else good to steal. I didn't need a big budget to do that.
In those days, that was the end of the 60s. The studio system, which had such force in the 30s and 40s and had such difficulty in the 50s, was really nearing the end of its thrust. But it was still in place and still wielded a considerable amount of power and held things in a considerable inertia. So the option of 25-year-old kids who were interested in film was not as clear as it is today to get into the industry, because once you got in, it was kind of unnerving how sclerotic it was.
The studios were still turning out films like Darling Lily, and they did Paint Your Wagon, where Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin got to sing. They were all trying to repeat the success of Sound of Music and My Fair Lady with little success, and a lot of the studios were close to bankruptcy.
Some studios were put on the block. A number of executives lost their jobs. And there was a real fear in the executive suites because they weren't at all sure what people wanted to see, particularly what young people wanted to see.
Easy Rider came along in 1969, cost $500,000, made by nobodies. Dope, unhappy ending, hippies, long hairs, and cleaned up. It was a huge hit, and it was really a revolution. These old guys in the studios had the foggiest idea of why this film was so successful or what was going on, and all they knew was that there was a guy named Dennis Hopper who directed it. So they grabbed onto the directors as saviors.
Although that's a film I wasn't part of that culture, but it did open a lot of doors for many people in California. And at the same time, giving youth a chance behind the camera and almost a deification of the director.
The Rain people are people made of rain. And when they cry, they disappear.
One such deified director was Francis Coppola. Coppola's dream was to run his own studio, to be called American Zoetrope.
Where did you hear about the Rain people?
I don't remember.
Were they in a story someone told you?
No, it's true.
Did you ever see them?
Francis wrote a script that involved a cross-country journey. It was supposed to be kind of an existential leap into the unknown. In fact, they wound up in Nebraska. And they said, if we can do this in Nebraska, there's no reason that we have to be in Hollywood. And it was within 3 or 4 months after that that Francis had made the decision to set up American Zoetrope in San Francisco.
Francis wanted to own everything that you needed to make a film. He wanted to own the cameras, own the lights and sound, own the editing machine and the building. He didn't want to have to answer to anybody. He wanted to be able to mount a movie 2 days after he thought of it if he wanted to. That grew to a bigger version of that later in the 70s, where he came back to Hollywood and bought this studio, this physical old studio. And that was the second incarnation of the Zoetrope dream.
Every time I've seen a studio in different travels, you know, Ardmore in Ireland, and my first impulse is to want to immediately buy it and bring a lot of people there, you know, and start it going again. But there are a lot of forces today that work against that.
I'm all for studio-based pictures anyway.
I felt like we were in that play Gypsy, and that, you know, he was our mother. And whenever these people came in that had the money, like the investors from some shopping mall in Indiana, he'd say, dress up real nice, kids, and do the scene for them. And see, here's what I'm doing, this is what I have, and give us some money. And then they did, and then he'd spend it all. But he had many more ideas. He said, eventually, we're all going to be owners in this. You know, that we're going to put you under contract, and see that in the parking lot right there, we're going to put a beautiful commissary with a glass roof. And his dreams, just his imagination just was going on and on and on to stuff that it wasn't really relevant to making the movie. But he had this wonderful idea for the artists, and it just never works.
In a way, Francis attempted to be all of our godfathers. You know, to this day he calls me Stevie, little Stevie Spielberg. You know, I love it, but only he calls me that. But he would always sort of have us sitting at his feet listening to the way movies should be made, because Francis, of our entire group, he was actually a generation before mine, but Francis was the first young guy ever to make it.
Francis had signed a development deal with Warner Brothers. So the first film that Zoetrope produced under this agreement was THX 1138, which George had made at film school at USC. The challenge was to take a student film, which was 20 minutes long, and expand it into a feature with a story that had a beginning, middle, and an end, and yet had something of that crazy futuristic vision that THX had.
The truth of it is, I was very involved in non-linear filmmaking and non-story, character-driven scenarios, and I felt this was a chance to sort of push the envelope, to do the kinds of films that I had been doing in film school and do it on a grander scale.
We kept saying that this is not a film about the future, it's a film from the future. So there are things in the film that are mysterious that we don't bother to explain, because in the future everyone would understand this. But, you know, it still has a car chase, still has a romance, has an escape.
When I made THX, I knew it was going to be controversial in terms of what the studio wanted. They gave me the chance to make the movie. They didn't really understand it. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, and I even said to Francis, I said, I'm never going to get a chance to make a movie like this again. I'm really going to go all the way with this, and if it destroys my career, I guess that's what's going to happen, but I'll never get this shot again. So I took it.
This was the time to make it. If there was any time at all, this was going to be it. So there was a great deal of urgency about that, and a lot of energy. We did everything and anything, you know, to get in there.
Pain in Hell has two sides. The kind you can touch with your hand, the kind you can feel in your heart, your soul, the spiritual side. And you know, the worst of the two is the spiritual.
Marty knew every setup, every shot, and he had it all drawn out, so he could literally show his cameraman exactly in pictures how the shot would look. We were doing 27, 28 setups a day, which is phenomenal. He had thought out almost every single tracking shot, and it became his signature, and we just left the camera on the dolly all the time. And so, you know, every move had a little bit of choreography. Marty today is much calmer than he was then. I mean, Marty was about to burst at any minute in 1973.
I didn't even think the film was going to be released. I just got the money to make it. I thought these guys, it's great. They gave me the money, and maybe someday it'll be shown. I said, I doubt if this picture's going to get on a screen.
I borrowed money all over this neighborhood, left and right, from everybody, and I never paid them back, so I can't borrow no money from nobody no more, right? So who does that leave me to borrow money from but you?
We went over to Warner's at lunchtime, and it was in a little screening room, and there was an executive there named John Calley, who was really, in a lot of ways, responsible for a lot of interesting pictures that got made at that time.